I wanted to talk to you because your state, which is not overwhelmingly conservative or Democratic, you have statewide officials who are Democratic. You have a legislature that's Republican. Your state had this question put to them. And they voted before everybody else did to say, we don't want a right that we have taken away. That is the kind of thing that when you put this question to voters, even if they generally don't like the idea of abortion, they generally dislike having a right taken away more.
Yeah, and not just that, and it's good to be here and see you again. It's not just that, it's that people don't want politicians making very personal decisions for them. And I think one of the things that comes to mind when listening to what's happening in Ohio is that what we're seeing is frankly, extreme politicians trying to not just take away rights, but insert themselves into very personal decisions. And I think what we saw in Kansas was an overwhelming pushback against those extreme policies. And I think what we're seeing right now is a continued recognition that, look, this is scary. There are so many people out there whose lives were immediately impacted when Roe was overturned. And I think that we're going to continue to see people showing up from across the political spectrum, the ideological spectrum, across demographics, and all across the country, showing up to say, stop trying to take our rights away and stop trying to push these extreme agendas. We need you to get stuff done. And getting stuff done looks an awful lot like making sure that life is more affordable for people and not these extreme policies.
David, let's talk about what's going on in Ohio right now. First of all, this is one of those August special elections. Republicans themselves tried to get rid of these August special elections because one can assume that in August, turnout is low for these things. The results tend to be exaggerated toward extreme groups who will rally around a particular cause. So Republicans didn't like the idea of them in the first place. Now they are using one to set up the outcome of the November vote on abortion in Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, they actually wrote a law banning them. Right now, it's illegal to have one in Ohio. Our current Supreme Court allowed them to do it. But this August election violates the Ohio Revised Code of Ohio. That's how lawless this is. But as you did in your perfect setup, they are desperate to get ahead of this November election because they're scared that what happened in Kansas will happen here. The numbers are very strong here. They know that. So they literally broke their own law banning August special elections to demand an August special election to change the rules. They know that they greatly fear they would lose otherwise, and I think they probably would, and that's why they're trying to change the rules midstream. It's outrageous.
Congresswoman, let's talk about this. Kansas was just one example. It was the earliest example, but in the midterm elections last year, there were several other states that had a ballot question as it related to abortion. In places like Michigan, they were specifically brought to enshrine abortion protections in the Constitution. But in other states, it was more like Kansas, where it was anti-abortion groups who had tried to put this question. Regardless of who brought the question and who what the voter population was, everybody came to the same conclusion. Either they don't want their rights taken away, or, as you said, they don't want politicians getting involved in this stuff. Is this the kind of thing? Can people who want to enshrine abortion rights in the face of the fall of Roe use these ballot measures, notwithstanding what they're trying to do in Ohio, to get those rights?
Look, I think that, of course, this is going to depend state to state. And I think what you're going to see is the general public and regular people just are not okay with all of these extreme policies. And, you know, that's true in Kansas. I think that's true in a lot of other places. As you said, we saw that on the ballot in so many other states. And I think, look, for each state that needs to rally support against pushing for these extreme policies that we're seeing in the state legislatures, or if a bunch of people need to get together from across the broad spectrum of demographics and ideologies need to get together to protect their rights, I think we're going to continue to see that happening all across the country. And Kansas is, of course, I'm very proud of my state. I feel like we showed up and demonstrated to people that when you build a coalition of people who want to maintain their rights, who want to push back against extreme policies, it's absolutely possible.
David, what happens here? What's the only solution? Is the only solution to have people turn out for a vote that they normally wouldn't turn out for, a special election that has one question on it. Because if those who want to do what they're trying to do in Ohio succeed, there is a very good chance that the effort to enshrine abortion rights in Ohio in November will fail. It's not an impossibility, because if 59% of voters say they support it, you may be able to get everybody out to get more than 60%. But what do you see happening in Ohio?
Well, let me say one thing, that this is not just an Ohio thing. This was not written in Ohio. I don't think the state rep who came up with this from Chillicothe wrote it himself. This is part of the national effort. My first book was called Laboratories of Autocracy. Yes. All these states have the same playbook. If this succeeds in Ohio to raise the standard, it's coming everywhere where they can get it. So we have to crush it in Ohio to give ourselves a chance to protect abortion access in November. But we also have to crush it in Ohio. So my hope is we do it in a way that basically says to the national Republican effort, that the folks, this is being funded by out-of-state billionaires, for example. I want this to be such a route that this stops it from happening in other states, where I'm afraid it will happen if it succeeds here. They know that the people of these states are a threat to these rigged and gerrymandered legislatures and to their extremist agenda. If the people rise up, they can stop it. So whether it's Ohio or other states, they're going to try and make it harder and harder for the people to weigh in. So if we stop in Ohio, I hope we build momentum to stop it wherever it may come up across the country. And it will if they succeed here. They're always learning from each other's successes, failures. And if this thing succeeds in Ohio, it's coming to other states very quickly.
Right. And Congresswoman, you're nodding at that because it does seem to be, I mean, at this point, people have the opportunity to understand what's going on. That's, I guess, the value of doing these having these conversations on TV. Understand that it's happening. This may be the opportunity to stop this effort in its tracks.
Yeah, and I think David made such a great point when he said that a lot of times these are out-of-state billionaires and very wealthy individuals that are funding these efforts to, frankly, to suppress the voices of the people who are, for me right here at home in Kansas. And again, another reason that I was so proud to see our state step up and push back against these extreme policies. And I'm pulling for the folks in Ohio for the same thing.
David, you and I talked in a different context about different environments, particularly around, I think it was Tennessee that you and I have been talking about when those two young men got expelled from the legislature. The point you make is that in a lot of these places, you may have a more balanced picture statewide when there are statewide elections, but in a lot of these states, there are gerrymandered situations that cause Republican majorities or supermajorities, and that people's votes can be very, very important and instrumental if they understand that. In your opinion, in some of these states with gerrymandered Republican majorities, is that a solvable problem with people showing up to vote? Or have we gotten so far down this road of gerrymandering that it's not, and that states can be substantially more conservative and reckless than even Congress can?
I mean, right now it's a crisis. We have terrible gerrymandering, and we have a crisis of uncontested races that is making the legislation not at all reflect the people. I keep saying, Representative, you'll like this, that Kansas is sort of the bat signal to the country that these states are not nearly as extreme as their legislatures.
Right.
Their legislatures are drawn to allow extremists to exist in a world with no accountability, so they pass laws completely out of touch with their own people. And that's why I hope these ballot initiatives can succeed, because that's where that will really reflect the people. Over the long term, we cannot accept it. And I don't think it's easy, but whether it's bringing, again, ballot measures where you can to end gerrymandering, like they did in Michigan, and it succeeded. We did it a few years ago in Ohio. It succeeded. Our lawless legislature simply ignored the Constitution. Then it comes down to running in all these districts. Even if they gerrymander, we should never accept half of them never being opposed. They are living with no accountability. If we don't run, we make that lack of accountability so much worse. And it fuels the extremism, because they can pass all these crazy laws, and there's not even anyone knocking on their door the next election, even pointing that out. So we have to take on the gerrymandering. But even in that gerrymandered world, there's a lot we can do to bring accountability back to these state houses that largely don't have any of it, which is making this downward spiral of extremism as bad as it is. So there's a lot we can do. In a long game mindset, though, we're not going to solve it in the next cycle.